Welcome to Puck Talk CS. Today I'm joined by Steve Ellis, DFO, prospect analyst, and chief editor, I believe, correct?
Associate editor.
Associate editor. And Steve has done a phenomenal job. This is the person that I read all of my prospect analysis from. And obviously in gear for the New York Rangers, which is part of this show, but overall, just he has content flowing day and night. Also a big race car guy, right?
Yeah, let me see. I could probably show it right here. Got my steering wheel for sim racing. So,
There
yeah,
you
of
go.
course.
So, Steve, I'm sure you've been very busy this year. I think between the influx of talent now at the NHL level and what's coming in, I think, keeping eyes on prospects, I think, has become a lot more of a hobby for NHL fans as the draft has grown and the market's grown. But I'm going to ask you a ton of questions about the New York Rangers specifically today. Uh, First being under Chris Drury, the Rangers have selected Offman, Sikora, Perreault, Emery with first round draft choices in each of those respective years. Do you see Drury moving a first at the trade deadline? I feel like with four nations, those questions have kind of popped up earlier than expected.
I don't think so. I think you still want to continue to get those pieces because the first round, having a first round pick is great, but a lot of times teams just want an actual drafted prospect. If you're going
Hmm.
to use that in a trade there. So I'd say, hold on to what you got right now for that case. Like, I think there's a good argument for buying and selling if you're this team. I think defensively, they've got some players they need to move on from, I think. Uh, so then you got to see what you're going to do from there. And I don't think they should aggressively buy. I don't think this is the year to do that. A, because the market's not great, and B, this team's not going to go win the Stanley Cup this year. But stay pat, keep what you have. It's a good draft, not a great draft. I don't think any team's going to go out there and value a first round pick higher this year than in previous years. But I guess we'll have to see there.
Yeah, the players I'd mentioned were all the first players named in those drafts, so not necessarily first round draft choices. The only player that was selected after the first round was Sikora, and that was because that pick was dealt for Andrew Kopp, and they did go on a run in 2022. Now, I talked to Dan Rosen the other day about Perot. Do you think he can make the jump to the NHL in April? And if so, should the Rangers put Perot in that position? Like, do you think he's ready for that?
I think just the way things are going, I'm always on board with college guys going straight to the NHL because at that point, otherwise you can send them to Hartford, sure, but I think go out there and try and play with some keep guys. Like if the only option is put him on the fourth line, that's one thing. But if you can slot him in your top six and you should look for that or give him some power play time, I think he can give this team a nice boost. And we've seen that in the past where teams will get these guys that come straight out of college and they'll end up producing right away. So for me, I think Perot should be ready to go. As for what we'll see from him next year, I think that's a more interesting question because you'll see guys like Cutter Gauthier or Rucker McGroarty or these top players from college struggle a little bit right out of the gate going to the NHL because it is such a big workload difference. But this is someone who watching him play at the NTDP, he seems to be when there's more work to be played, when there's games are more important, he shows up. So I'm a really big fan of him. I think he'll be ready to go to the NHL once the season's over, and I guess we'll just see kind of how Boston College does.
Yeah, I also just as a tidbit, I guess more universally, what do you think of Leonard? I know, I think drafted ninth overall in that 2023 draft. And between Smith, Perot, and Leonard going in that draft, it seems like his stock has really risen to like after the World Juniors at a really high level. So what do you think of Leonard overall?
Yeah, I think he's kind of developed in the player most scouts were expecting him to be. Someone who could just make a difference every single shift. He doesn't need to score to be effective. We can see how he's actually pretty physical. He likes taking guys out of he's got that nastiness that you're looking for from a guy like that who
Hmm.
he's probably not going to drop the gloves a lot in the NHL, but he's going to go make you really mad. And you need to be able to do that. And he's got that offense to back it up and a great shot. So for me, he's my favorite player on that Boston College line. And it's because he's always doing something with or without the puck, which is something you really want to see.
I love that. And the Capitals have some really good value there in that draft selection. Colby Cohn was recently on the show as well, and he mentioned earlier this week Drew Fortescue and that he really likes the game he can play. He's steady. I'd mention him There's my dryer for you. He mentioned how the Drew Fortescue, he can make the jump to the NHL. But I think this is a player that in the Rangers system, between the Emery selection, I think some of the flash and talent at the forward group hasn't been talked a lot about. Do you think Fortescue can make that jump as well to the NHL level?
He shouldn't do it this year, but I do think he will be an NHL defenseman. This is a guy who's just really good in his own zone. He's played a ton of minutes the last couple of years, whether it be at Boston College, whether it be with that NTDP team a couple of years ago. You see that some of those two-way capabilities, but that's not really his game. For me, it's all about what he does in his own zone. You look kind of like EJ Emery's got that size, but he's also really good defensively. But then you go look at Fortescue. I think his skating has improved over time, but he's really good transitionally. I think he's a smart defenseman. Are we talking a high ceiling for him? No, I think we're looking at maybe a third pairing defenseman, but a decent one at that that's going to get the job done in his own zone. And you need guys like that. Not everyone's going to be a top pairing defenseman.
And with the Rangers' defensive prospects, we mentioned Fortescue and Emery. Emery's got a little while to go, but with the Borgen signing and Adam Fox remaining there, obviously as kind of the leader on the defense for the Rangers, there seem to be some holes popping up. Where do you see the situation with Miller? Because I find we're seeing more, uh, I guess in some ways, like Kako at the forward group, where if there's not room, some of these young players are being moved, but it's solely because of where they fit into the lineup. Do you think Miller can be a casualty of that? But I guess overall, in the bigger picture, how do you view the influx of talent coming in and how they move around at times?
It's difficult because there's a lot of good options that could be traded. Like I know Zach Jones is the one that's the name being thrown around the most because he's never playing anymore. It seems like. But when you come to Miller, like that's a guy that a lot of teams will be interested in. Would you like to keep him? Absolutely, guys that can be that physical and when he's at the top of his game can be very smart in his own zone. Yeah, that's a good player to have. He makes himself difficult to play against, and you're looking for guys like that to be important parts of your blue line. But at the same time, they got to explore the trade value with the trade market. There's going to be a lot of teams looking for him. Right-handed defensemen are more the rage, but if you got a guy who can move and who can and can play the left side and can be tough to play against, I still think there's a lot of teams that are going to want a guy like that.
And I guess we've talked about almost as many of the prospects for the Ranger system as you could talk, we could mention, but I did play a little bit of a game with Dan Rosen, and I thought it went really well with what he talked about and kind of the conversations it opened up. I'm not one for childlike games, but I'm going to mention a few names to you, and I just want your opinion on where they're at right now or where you think they can go as a player. You comfortable with that?
Let's do it.
All right. And actually, most of these names were on your top 10 uh, Ranger prospect pool from August. So I figure let's see where they moved from then to now, in your opinion. First being Brennan Othman.
Oh, man, that's a guy that I've watched for years. Like I think the first time I watched him play, he was 13. So like a guy that I've
Wow.
really liked, a guy who's very tough to play against, and I feel like I want to see more. We haven't seen that big improvement year to year. You see those flashes of skill, but between some missed time this year, not producing at an incredible rate, like I want to see that big step. Do I think he's still got some NHL potential or in the future there? Yeah, I do. I just want to see him go out there and dominate shifts in a way we just haven't seen.
Adam Edstrom.
Just a solid around guy, like more of a depth piece, I think, but he's smart, he's tough to play against, and again, you're looking for guys like that.
Did you expect him to be in the NHL?
No, no, I don't think anyone did, to be honest.
Okay, so he's a diamond in the rough. EJ Emery.
Love EJ Emery. He's one of my favorite prospects in hockey, and it's because
Oh,
he can go out there and play with these really skilled guys. Like we saw him with Cole Hudson last year, and I thought he was just fantastic at just simplifying things. Where Hudson was the one going out there and rushing the puck and trying to do things. Emery's like, all right, I'm going to just be a bulldozer, knock guys down. You try coming near me, I'm going to take that space away. Really good skater. I thought he could have gone even higher in the draft. So I do like EJ Emery.
all right. Brett Berard.
A guy that isn't big, but I think that he's got that little tenacity to him where he wants to move, he wants to make things happen, and I think he'll be one of those guys he'll play some NHL games. Now, maybe not a ton, we'll see, but I think that there's a guy there that who is a bit of aggressive. He's got a good motor and can play an energy role.
Adam Sikora.
That's one where it's interesting. His development kind of was interesting, but I don't think he's going to be a big time producer in the NHL. That's not his thing. It's more of going out there and working really hard, winning those battles. Like it almost feels like he takes things personally there. So he could be one of those guys that's maybe a fourth liner, maybe a call up option, but can kill penalties and things like that.
The next three, I think, are extreme wild cards. Robertson.
I don't really know if there's anything there, to be honest, anymore. It's kind of just this guy who's been in the system for a while, hasn't really shown it. Like a lot of the notes that a scout might have on them from his draft year in 2019 hasn't really changed at this point. So not too high on him.
Not high on Robertson. Garand.
I think he could be a backup goal in the NHL. I think that he's not a big goalie, but he's really athletic. I think he's got a really good glove hand. He moves well, skates well in the crease. So I think he could be a backup goalie.
And lastly, Bryce McConnell Barker.
Oh man. So I remember watching again, that's another guy I kind of saw at a young age where it seemed like, okay, there's something there because he's a good two-way player, really smart, has crazy hair. But also, for me, it's he wants to support his teammates. He wants to go out there. He's not going to be the guy driving the play. He's not going to go out there and put a billion points up on the board like we're seeing him in the AHL. He's been fine. More of a fourth line guy at best. But to me, he's not too high on my radar.
Is there one Ranger prospect hot take or take opinion you have that stands out against the crowd that you proudly stand on?
I guess is really just I think EJ Emery is a top 4 defenseman and is going to be way better than most people think he is. And I think I would like to see him go out there and start moving the puck a bit better and be more of an offensive driver. I know his agent has tweeted about him many times saying, "Look, people say he can't score." It's like, well, he literally scored 0 goals last year. So I would say that doesn't seem like a lot of goals, but I think there is still the budding offensive ability that, at least from talking to Emery, he's a guy who loves to shoot the puck and he wants to keep getting better at that. So I think if he unlocks that element of his game, we could be talking about a guy who's a very big impact guy.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Steve. I know we're on a little bit of crunch time, and I hope you enjoy that concert. And we'll be keeping up with you as we come down the pipeline here of the draft because it's now, it is a juggernaut of something that everyone peels their eyes to when it comes that time. And I think with the Four Nations break, it'll be some time too to digest more of that information. So thanks for joining me, Steve.
Oh, there's no break in the Four Nations. I'm excited for that. I'm excited to watch that hockey. It's best on best. I will argue this is a hot take. The Olympics are the most
Okay.
overrated hockey tournament in the world, but this one is going to be a fun little appetizer for that.
Yeah, and a nice little like different teams, different players on different teams during the season. So I like that. No break, but a little bit more time to read your material on the draft for sure. So I'll keep tabs. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
Yeah, thanks so much.